The gymnasium echoed with the sounds of sneakers squeaking against polished wood floors and the rhythmic thud of basketballs being dribbled. Jamal Carter, a young African-American athlete, stood at the center of it all, his heart racing with adrenaline. He was the star player of the Atlanta Titans, the local high school basketball team, and tonight was the state championship game. The crowd surged with energy, their cheers blending into a frantic symphony as Jamal dribbled the ball down the court, weaving through defenders with grace and precision. "Go, Jamal! You got this!" shouted his best friend, Marcus, from the sidelines, his voice cutting through the noise. Jamal glanced over and saw Marcus pumping his fists in encouragement, a wide grin plastered on his face. With just seconds left on the clock and the Titans trailing by 2 points, Jamal felt the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath, pushing aside the noise around him. He feigned left, spun right, and launched the ball toward the hoop. Time slowed as the ball sailed through the air, arcing perfectly before swishing through the net. The gym erupted. "Yeah, that's what I'm talking about." Marcus leaped into the air, high-fiving fellow teammates around him. Jamal's heart swelled with pride as his teammates rushed to embrace him, their laughter and cheers enveloping him like a warm blanket. After the final whistle blew, signaling their victory, Jamal stood at the center of the court, basking in the glory. He could see the fans, a sea of faces filled with admiration, their applause ringing in his ears. The local news had already started to gather around him, cameras clicking as they captured the moment. It was a dream come true, a culmination of years of hard work and dedication. "Jamal, can we get a quick interview?" a reporter called out, shoving a microphone in his direction. "Of course," he replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "I just want to say thank you to my teammates, coaches, and everyone who supported us. This victory is for all of you." As the night wore on, Jamal was swept up in a whirlwind of celebration. His teammates hoisted him onto their shoulders, parading him around the gym. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter, joy, and the promise of a bright future. Invitations poured in from elite events, and whispers of college scouts looking to recruit him began to circulate. Jamal could almost taste the possibilities that lay ahead. Later that evening, after the excitement had subsided, Jamal and his friends decided to continue the celebration at an upscale club known for its vibrant nightlife. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored pants, Jamal felt a surge of confidence as they approached the entrance. The neon lights flickered above them, casting a glow that promised a night of fun and camaraderie. However, as they reached the door, their excitement quickly turned to confusion. The bouncer, a towering figure with arms crossed, peered down at Jamal with an expression that was anything but welcoming. "Sorry, man, but you can't come in," the bouncer said, his voice gruff as he gestured dismissively. "Dress code?" Jamal's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "I'm dressed fine," he replied, bewildered. His friends exchanged glances, the laughter around them fading. "It's just not going to happen," the bouncer insisted, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Are you serious right now?" Marcus interjected, stepping forward. "He just won the state championship. You can't deny him entry for a dress code." The bouncer remained unmoved, his gaze steady and unyielding. "Policy's policy. No exceptions." Jamal felt a wave of humiliation wash over him, the earlier elation of victory replaced with a bitter sting. He turned to his friends, who looked equally frustrated and confused. "Let's just go," he muttered, trying to swallow the lump forming in his throat. As they turned away from the entrance, Jamal's mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. He had always known that the world could be unfair, but experiencing it firsthand felt like a cold slap in the face. The laughter and cheers of the night seemed a distant memory, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung in the air. In that moment, he realized that his journey was just beginning, and the barriers he would face were far from over. The air was heavy with tension as Jamal stood at the entrance of the upscale club, his heart racing with confusion and humiliation. The bouncer, a hulking figure dressed in a black uniform, crossed his arms and glared down at Jamal and his friends. "I said you can't come in." "Dress code?" he repeated coldly, his gaze unwavering. Jamal's friend Marcus stepped forward, his fists clenched in frustration. Come on, man. We all look good. This is ridiculous. He's the star player of the Falcons. You can't do this. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. The bouncer shrugged, his expression devoid of empathy. Doesn't matter. Rules are rules, he replied, his tone dismissive as he scanned the group, his eyes landing on Jamal. And you don't belong here. A knot tightened in Jamal's stomach as he felt the weight of those words. He didn't belong here. He glanced at his friends, their faces a mix of shock and anger. Let's just go, he muttered, trying to suppress the feeling of defeat that washed over him. But before he could turn away, a voice chimed in from the side. Excuse me, what's going on here? A young woman approached, her notepad in hand and a camera slung around her neck. It was Maria, a local journalist known for her fearless reporting on social issues. She had witnessed the incident unfold from a distance, her instincts kicking in. This guy just refused to let my friend in because of some bogus dress code, Marcus replied, his voice rising in agitation. It's all because he's black. Maria's eyes narrowed as she observed the scene, a fire igniting within her. I'm sorry, but is that the reason? Can you explain further? She asked, her pen poised to jot down notes, capturing every detail of the confrontation. The bouncer shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at her. I'm just doing my job, he insisted, though the weakness in his voice suggested he knew he was on shaky ground. Doing your job? Jamal echoed incredulously. You mean discriminating against someone based on the color of their skin? That's not a job, that's a disgrace. Maria stepped closer, her eyes focused on Jamal. Can I get your name? She asked, sensing the gravity of the moment. This needs to be reported. Jamal Carter, he replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. But I don't know if it'll make a difference. It feels like my word against his. Maria shook her head, determination etched on her features. You deserve to have your story told. This is bigger than just one night out. It's about the systemic racism that still exists in our community. She turned back to the bouncer. You're going to have to explain this to the public. As the bouncer opened his mouth to respond, Jamal's friends began to voice their outrage again, but he raised a hand to silence them. Let's just go, he said, feeling the anger dissipate into a sense of resignation. They began to walk away, but Maria called after them. Jamal, wait. I'll make sure your story gets out there. You're not alone in this. The next day, Jamal awoke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly on his nightstand. He rubbed his eyes, still groggy, and reached for the device. Notifications flooded in, social media posts, messages from friends, and alerts from news outlets. He opened one of the messages, his heart sinking as he read the headline. Local athlete denied entry based on race. A night of discrimination in Atlanta. Jamal's stomach churned as he scanned through the article, written by Maria. It detailed the incident in vivid detail, capturing the humiliation he felt and the unjust treatment he endured. As he read, anger and gratitude battled within him. He felt exposed, his pain laid bare for the world to see, yet he was also grateful that someone was finally speaking out against the injustice. Look at this, he said, showing the article to Marcus, who had come over to check on him. It's everywhere. Marcus leaned in, his brow furrowed. This is crazy, man. People are furious. Look at the comments. They're rallying behind you. But as Jamal scrolled further, he saw a darker side to the attention. Hateful comments flooded the post, questioning his worth and belittling his achievements. They think you're just trying to make a scene, Marcus said, his voice wavering. Don't let it get to you. I know, Jamal replied, feeling the weight of the hateful words. But it does. It hurts. As the day wore on, Jamal found himself overwhelmed by the tidal wave of support and backlash. His phone buzzed constantly, notifications blaring like sirens. Messages poured in from teammates, community leaders, even strangers who had heard about his story. They expressed solidarity, sharing their own experiences with racism. Yet, the hateful comments loomed over him like a dark cloud, reminding him of the prejudices that still existed. He took a deep breath, trying to center himself. I can't let this define me, he whispered, determination rising within him. I have to keep pushing forward. As Jamal sat on the edge of his bed, the weight of the world pressing down on him, he replayed the events of the previous night in his mind. The humiliation of being turned away from the club haunted him, and the anger that bubbled inside him was hard to contain. He clenched his fists, wishing he could channel that anger into something productive. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from his coach, Coach Thompson. "Jamal, meet me at the gym. We need to talk," it read. Jamal pushed himself off the bed. A spark of determination ignited within him. He quickly changed into his practice gear and made his way to the gym. The familiar squeak of sneakers on polished hardwood greeted him as he entered. The court was empty, save for Coach Thompson, who was shooting hoops alone. "Hey, Jamal," Coach Thompson said, turning as he saw his star player approach. "I heard about what happened last night. You okay?" "I don't know, Coach," Jamal replied, his voice heavy with frustration. "I'm just so angry. It feels like everything I've worked for doesn't matter. I don't even know how to process it all." Coach Thompson nodded, understanding the turmoil swirling inside Jamal. "That anger can either consume you or fuel you. Why don't we put it to good use? Let's hit the court. Show me what you've got." With that, Jamal grabbed a basketball and joined Coach on the court. They began a rigorous practice, running drills, and shooting baskets. Jamal poured every ounce of his frustration into the game, each shot becoming a release. As the ball swished through the net repeatedly, Jamal felt a sense of clarity. This was where he belonged, where he could be himself, free from judgment. "Good. That's it," Coach Thompson shouted, clapping his hands as Jamal executed a perfect layup. "Keep that energy going. Don't let anyone take your passion away from you." After hours of practice, Jamal collapsed onto the bleachers, panting heavily but feeling lighter. "Thanks, Coach. I needed that." "Anytime, Jamal. Remember, you're not alone in this. Your teammates, the community, they're all behind you. We'll figure this out together," Coach Thompson reassured him, offering a supportive smile. The following weekend, the community had organized a peaceful protest outside the exclusive club. As Jamal arrived, he was taken aback by the number of people who showed up to support him. Signs reading "Justice for Jamal" and "Equal Rights for All" were held high, and the energy was palpable. It felt like a movement, a collective voice rising against injustice. Among the crowd, his teammates, Tyler, Malik, and Sarah, spotted him and rushed over. "Jamal, we're so proud of you for standing up," Malik exclaimed, giving him a high five. "Yeah, man, you're an inspiration," Tyler added, his voice brimming with excitement. "This is just the beginning." As the protest grew, Jamal felt a renewed sense of purpose. He climbed onto a makeshift stage, microphone in hand, and looked out at the sea of faces. The crowd quieted, and he took a deep breath. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "What happened to me at that club wasn't just about me. It's about all the people who've been discriminated against because of their race. This isn't just a fight for one person. It's a fight for justice for everyone." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Jamal continued. "I want to see a world where talent is recognized, regardless of the color of your skin. We deserve to be treated with respect and dignity." His heart raced as he spoke, the words pouring out of him. As the rally continued, media cameras captured the moment, broadcasting Jamal's powerful message to the wider community. The protest drew in more supporters, but it also stirred discontent among the club's members, many of whom watched from a distance, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. "Look at them," one club member scoffed. "They think they can just waltz in and demand change. This is ridiculous." Another added, "They should know their place. We built this club for people like us." Unbeknownst to Jamal, their disdain would only fuel the fire of his movement. The protest was not just a demonstration. It was a declaration that the community would not stand for discrimination any longer. As Jamal stood amidst the cheers and chants, he felt a sense of unity that he had never experienced before. The barriers that once divided them were beginning to crumble, and with each passing moment, he realized that the fight for justice was not just his alone. It was theirs too. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets of Atlanta as Jamal Carter sat in the small, dimly lit office of his lawyer, Ms. Reynolds. The air was thick with tension, a palpable reminder of the battle that loomed ahead. Jamal fidgeted in his seat, his mind racing with thoughts of the protest, the outrage, and now the looming threat from Mr. Whitmore. "Jamal," Ms. Reynolds said, her voice steady, "I know this is overwhelming, but you have a strong case. The evidence of discrimination is clear." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made Jamal feel both supported and anxious. "The way you were treated at the club is not just a personal affront. It's part of a larger issue." He nodded, but the weight of the situation bore down on him. "What if they go after me? I can't afford a long legal battle." His voice trembled slightly, betraying his unease. "Mr. Whitmore's threats are just that, threats," she reassured him. "You have the backing of your community, and we'll make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. People need to hear your story." Just then, the door swung open, and Jamal's teammates, Tyler and Marcus, stepped in, their faces a mix of determination and concern. "Hey, man, we're here for you," Tyler said, his voice booming with confidence. "Whatever happens, we're with you." "Yeah, don't forget that," Marcus added, crossing his arms in solidarity. "You've already inspired so many people. We'll fight this together." Jamal felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. He couldn't imagine facing this battle without his friends by his side. "Thanks, guys. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." "Then let's make sure that your voice is heard," Tyler said, his enthusiasm infectious. "You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who has been pushed aside." Ms. Reynolds cleared her throat, drawing their attention back to the legal matters at hand. "The court date is set for next week, and we need to gather as much evidence as possible. If you can, connect with others who've had similar experiences. Their testimonies could strengthen our case." Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I'll reach out to the guys from the protest. I know some of them have stories to share." "Good," Ms. Reynolds said. "And remember, stay focused. The media will be watching closely. We need to present a united front." As they wrapped up the meeting, Jamal felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. The thought of walking into a courtroom, confronting the very people who had disrespected him, sent chills down his spine. But he also felt empowered, knowing that his struggle was part of something bigger. Later that evening, as Jamal lay in bed, he reflected on the events that had unfolded. The protest had garnered not just local attention, but had sparked conversations in households and businesses across the city. He thought of the messages he had received, both supportive and hateful. It was a strange mix of validation and vitriol that he never anticipated. The next day, Jamal met with a few friends from the protest at a local cafe. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, and he felt a sense of camaraderie as they discussed their next steps. "I spoke with some folks from the neighborhood," said Aisha, one of the girls from the protest. "They're willing to share their experiences. We can build a powerful narrative together." "Let's do it," Jamal replied, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone who has faced discrimination." As they strategized, the conversation turned serious. "What if Whitmore tries to intimidate us?" Marcus asked, concern etched on his face. "I'm not backing down," Jamal said firmly. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. If we stand together, we can't be silenced." The group shared nods of agreement, and Jamal felt a fire igniting within him. He was no longer just a basketball player. He was an advocate for change. With each passing day, he felt the weight of the community's hope resting on his shoulders, and he was determined to carry it with pride. As the week progressed, the anticipation for the court date grew. Jamal found himself practicing not just on the basketball court, but also in front of a mirror, rehearsing how he would present his story. He wanted to be heard, to ensure that his message of equality and justice resonated beyond the walls of the courtroom. The night before the big day, he sat in his room, surrounded by the support of his teammates and friends, all of whom had pledged to stand by him during the trial. The atmosphere was a mix of nerves and excitement, and as they shared stories and laughter, Jamal felt a sense of belonging that made him believe they were ready for whatever lay ahead. Tomorrow, "We make history," he declared, raising a water bottle like a trophy. The room erupted in cheers, and for a moment, Jamal felt invincible, ready to take on the world. The courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of conversation as Jamal Carter took a deep breath, his heart racing in his chest. It was a scene he had envisioned countless times since the incident at the club, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of sitting before the judge and an audience of supporters, friends, and reporters. He glanced at his teammates, who had filled the benches behind him, their faces a mixture of encouragement and determination. Coach Thompson sat beside them, his usual stoic demeanor now softened by a look of fierce pride. "Jamal Carter," the clerk called, snapping him back to the present. He stood, smoothing down his suit, a gesture meant to convey confidence, though he felt anything but. As he approached the witness stand, he could feel the weight of their gazes, the anticipation thick in the air. Taking his seat, he looked across the room at Mr. Whitmore, the owner of the club, who sat with his legal team, a smug expression etched across his face. "Please state your full name for the record," the judge prompted. "Jamal Carter," he replied, his voice steady despite the unease swirling within him. "I am a student and an athlete at Lincoln High School." "Mr. Carter, could you please recount the events that led to your experience at the club?" the prosecutor asked, her voice calm yet firm. Jamal cleared his throat, gathering his thoughts. "It was the night of my team's victory. We wanted to celebrate, and after hearing great things about the club, we decided to go there. We were dressed to impress. Suits, ties, everything. But when we arrived," he hesitated, feeling the familiar sting of humiliation. "The bouncer refused to let me in, claiming I didn't meet the dress code. But I looked around and saw others who had similar or less formal attire being allowed inside." The room was silent, every eye fixed on him, absorbing his words. Jamal continued, his voice gaining strength. "I felt embarrassed and confused. I had just led my team to victory, yet here I was, being told I wasn't good enough to enter a place simply because of the color of my skin." "Thank you, Mr. Carter," the prosecutor said, her eyes reflecting empathy. "No further questions." As Jamal returned to his seat, he could see the subtle nods of approval from his friends. The atmosphere shifted as Mr. Whitmore's lawyer stood up, adjusting his glasses as if preparing for battle. "Mr. Carter," he began, his tone condescending, "isn't it true that the club is a private establishment with the right to refuse entry to anyone they see fit?" "Of course," Jamal replied, trying to keep his composure. "But that doesn't mean they can discriminate against individuals based on race. Isn't it also true that your attire that night did not meet the club's dress code?" the lawyer pressed. "I was dressed appropriately. I was with my friends, and we were all dressed well. The dress code was just a pretext," Jamal shot back, a fire igniting within him. The tension in the room intensified, and he could feel the support of his teammates behind him, fueling his resolve. The lawyer scoffed, "You are just one player in a long line of applicants who may not have met the standards of our esteemed club. This is not about race. It's about maintaining a certain clientele. Tell that to the people who saw what happened that night. It's clear to everyone that this was about something much deeper," Jamal retorted, his voice rising slightly. As the questioning continued, Jamal's heart raced with every word exchanged. He could see Maria, the journalist, in the back of the courtroom, her eyes wide with determination. She had been instrumental in bringing this case to light, and he could feel the weight of her expectations. Then, as if the universe had timed it perfectly, Maria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She discreetly pulled it out, her expression shifting from concentration to shock. A few moments later, she stood up, raising her hand. "Your Honor, if I may," she called out, her voice strong and clear. The judge looked surprised but nodded, granting her permission to address the courtroom. "I have uncovered information regarding Mr. Whitmore's history with the club," she declared, her voice resonating through the room. "Evidence suggests that he has a pattern of discriminatory practices not just against Jamal, but against other athletes of color as well." The courtroom erupted into whispers, and Jamal's heart raced with a mix of hope and anxiety. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the potential turning point in a case that felt like a battle for more than just himself. The eyes of the room shifted back to Mr. Whitmore, whose smug facade cracked, revealing a flicker of concern. "Your Honor, I object," Mr. Whitmore's lawyer shouted, but the damage was done. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, and Jamal felt a surge of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they would finally break through the barriers that had confined so many before him. The courtroom was tense as Maria stepped forward, her heart racing. She had spent countless hours digging through documents, interviewing former club members, and gathering testimonies from those who had felt the sting of discrimination at Mr. Whitmore's exclusive club. As she stood before the jury, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady but passionate. "What I present today is not just a case about Jamal Carter. It's about a pattern of exclusion that has been perpetuated by Mr. Whitmore and his establishment." Jamal sat at the plaintiff's table, his fingers intertwined, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. He had poured his heart into this moment, and now it was in the hands of the jury. As Maria continued, she laid out the evidence: emails, testimonies from former club staff, and personal accounts from athletes who had been barred from entering the club based solely on their race. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a systematic effort to maintain an environment that excludes talented individuals based on the color of their skin, she asserted, her eyes scanning the jury's faces. The tension in the room was palpable. Jamal could see the jurors exchanging glances, their expressions shifting as they absorbed the weight of the evidence. Mr. Whitmore's club may claim to be private, but it is a microcosm of a larger societal issue, Maria concluded. We cannot allow such discriminatory practices to stand unchallenged. It is time for accountability. As she returned to her seat, Jamal felt a surge of gratitude for her relentless pursuit of the truth. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Mr. Whitmore's attorney stood up, adjusting his tie, ready to counter Maria's compelling argument. "Ladies and gentlemen, while my colleague paints a vivid picture of discrimination, the reality is that Mr. Whitmore has the legal right to refuse entry to anyone he sees fit, regardless of their race," he asserted confidently. "His club is a private establishment, and he has every right to enforce his dress code and membership criteria. There is no evidence here that proves racial discrimination was a factor in Jamal Carter's denial." The jury listened intently, but Jamal could see a flicker of doubt in their eyes. He leaned in closer, whispering to his lawyer, "They can't just ignore the truth." His lawyer gave him an encouraging nod, reassuring him that the evidence was strong. After a few moments, the judge called for a recess, allowing the jury to deliberate. As they filed out, Jamal's friends and supporters gathered around him, their faces filled with hope and determination. "You've got this, Jamal," one of his teammates, Marcus, said, clapping him on the back. "You've shown everyone what you're made of." Hours passed, and the courtroom remained tense. Finally, the jury returned, their faces serious. Jamal's heart raced as the foreperson stood up. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Jamal Carter," she announced, her voice clear and unwavering. Cheers erupted in the courtroom. Jamal could hardly contain his emotions as he stood, tears of joy welling in his eyes. His friends rushed to embrace him, their support overwhelming. "You did it, man," Marcus shouted, lifting Jamal off the ground in celebration. Outside the courthouse, the scene was electric. Supporters had gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for Jamal" and "Equality in Sports." Maria stepped forward, microphone in hand, ready to address the crowd. "Today, we have not just won a legal battle. We have sparked a movement for change," she proclaimed. "Jamal's courage has inspired us all, and together, we will continue to fight against discrimination in all its forms." As the crowd cheered, Jamal felt a sense of pride wash over him. He had not only fought for himself, but had also become a beacon of hope for others facing similar struggles. In the days that followed, he received a scholarship for a sports management program, along with an offer to serve as a community ambassador for inclusivity in sports. Meanwhile, Mr. Whitmore faced severe backlash, losing his business license and the support of the community that had once upheld him. Jamal stood tall, knowing that he had helped pave the way for a future where barriers could be broken and dreams could be realized, regardless of race. "This is just the beginning," he thought, a smile spreading across his face as he looked out at the supporters who had rallied around him. Change was possible, and he was determined to be a part of it.